What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Awesemo channel talking college football DFS. We have a single game slate today. It is Louisville taking on Ole Miss. Before we get started, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We will be bringing you behind the glass, showing you some of the tools we have for the college football product. There's everything from ownership, data charge. We have depth charts overall and written slate breakdowns plus more. So make sure to check that out. And let's get into the single game slate today. We will be bringing you over to Louisville first. So with Louisville and what you're seeing on the screen here, this is our data table that will continue to update through the offseason. A team like Louisville is replacing a ton of production. So some of these numbers may not be as accurate as you'll see today. They're losing players like Javian Hawkins. They lost Tutu Atwell, Des Fitzpatrick, but they do return their quarterback Malik Cunningham. And starting with this game, you have Louisville as the 10-point underdog. This is moving a little bit towards Louisville since we had the news that Lane Kiffin will not be coaching. He's tested positive for COVID, so he will not be out there today. But you still have Ole Miss as a sizable favorite, and this has an immense total overall, 75.5 points. But right away, we want to start with Malik Cunningham, who is an extremely expensive player on both platforms today. He is trailing only quarterback on the other side, Matt Corral, for price. So Malik Cunningham, first of all, he stands out as one of the strong dual threats on this slate. Easily one of the best targets, 609 rushing yards last year, 7 touchdowns on the ground. He also completed 64% of his passes for just north of 2,600 yards, 20 scores, 12 interceptions. He's not quite the same player that Matt Corral is overall, but he is another really strong value. And what stands out on this slate compared to yesterday and some other slates we've had, pricing is very tight today. Malik Cunningham and Matt Corral, if you put them both in your lineup, you're just going to have a lot of trouble getting in some other studs. But outside of the quarterback position, we like Cunningham. He's a strong value. You have the running back room a little bit unsettled. So Jalen Mitchell and Hassan Hall are back for this team. Hassan Hall battled injuries a little bit last year. Hassan Hall was previously considered the handcuff. He carried 54 times for just 223 yards. That was 4.1 yards per carry. Jalen Mitchell, he emerged towards the end of the year, carried 52 times, but had over 100 more yards rushing than Hassan Hall. And he averaged 6.7 yards per attempt. Neither was particularly strong as a receiver, of course, because you had Javian Hawkins functioning in that role. But Mitchell caught 4 passes. He is the better value overall, but he is significantly more expensive than a guy like Hassan Hall, who, while listed as the backup, still should have a role in this offense. And he's somewhat of a bigger back. You may see him like on the goal line, things like that. Trevion Cooler was listed as their third string back. Maybe if you're just throwing darts, you could look to him as somebody who gets a carry or two. But I think you mainly want to focus on Jalen Mitchell and Hassan Hall. Hall is fitting more of that just flyer role, cheap guy that gets the rest of your lineup together if you're playing a bunch of studs. But that's worth noting here. In the wide receiver room for Louisville, again, they're replacing a ton of production. The only clear-cut starter they listed was Jordan Watkins. They listed co-starters in their other 2 positions. Braden Smith, co-starter with Josh Johnson. Justin Marshall, co-starter with Tyler Harrell, which is really interesting to look at here because you have some of these guys near the min price. A guy like Tyler Harrell comes in at $3,900 overall. Just really cheap price for him. Again, no production last year, so you're going based on feel. But up at the top, you have Braden Smith. He is fairly cheap. Again, the co-starter designation is not good for him. The one player without the co-starter designation, Jordan Watkins, 9,600 on DraftKings, 9,500 on FanDuel. He is expensive, and I think you can get some cheaper value playing some of the other players we already mentioned. But ultimately, if you need to go up and play one of these studs that you know is going to get the ball, Jordan Watkins fits the bill. Josh Johnson's also really cheap, $3K on DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel. So there's options for Louisville. Last player I'll mention is the tight end, Marshawn Ford. He's been a part-time player at some points in his career, and he's a little expensive, so I'm probably not trying to play a lot of Marshawn Ford at 8,100 DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel, where he is the better play over there. Ranking these pass catchers, in terms of price, it's still Jordan Watkins, number 1. From there, it would be Justin Marshall 2, Josh Johnson 3, followed by Tyler Harrell and Braden Smith. Again, mostly because of price. But we will take you over to the Ole Miss side. Again, we have Matt Corral, just egregiously expensive, but for good reason. Matt Corral, He's one of the better signal callers in college football. And here you have Matt Corral, 506 rushing yards last year, completed 71% of his passes, 10.1 yards per attempt, 29 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 3,337 yards for Matt Corral. Just immensely productive. The only issue that you might find is that he's losing Kenny Yeboah and Elijah Moore, but still plenty of pass catchers to step up in the wings for Ole Miss. Matt Corral, he is priced for this for a reason. I think he's a better value on FanDuel. You can see the difference in prices between the two platforms. Corral, still a little bit expensive, but a little more affordable compared to the other options on FanDuel overall. In the running back room, you have a somewhat of a committee on Ole Miss. Jerrion Ealy is the lead back, but he will cede some opportunities to other players. And because of some inefficient play, you saw Snoop Connor kind of hit the doghouse last year. He was listed pretty low on the depth chart, 4th. In order, it was Jerrion Ealy 1st, Henry Parrish 2nd, Kentrell Bullock 3rd, Snoop Connor 4th. Pricing does not reflect that, especially on DraftKings, where you have Henry Parrish at 3,300. He is my favorite running back punt play on this slate. Jerrion Ealy is going to lead this room, but as you can see, towards the end of the year last year, even in games where you had Jerrion Ealy carrying 17 times, Snoop Connor 8 times, Henry Parrish 7 times, this is going to be a timeshare to some degree. Ealy is going to lead the backfield, but it does give you a little bit of upside with players like Parrish that are really cheap, and they can fill out your roster similar to a Hassan Haskins on the other side. Prefer Parrish to Haskins straight up, but it's close, and it's based on price. In the receiver room, you are, again, losing Kenny Yeboah and Elijah Moore. The listed starters on this team were Braylon Sanders, Jonathan Mingo, and Dontario Drummond. They are all priced way up. Sanders in particular, 15.3 on DraftKings is extremely expensive. Mingo is actually the cheapest among all 3 of these starters, and he's the player that had the most time on the field last year. He was a distant second behind Elijah Moore, but he had the highest target share, 15.7%. Receiving yards per game, pretty low, but he's a guy that did emerge down the stretch, had 8 targets in that final game where Elijah Moore didn't play. Drummond had 9. And of course, Sanders, he did not play in that game either. A couple interesting notes for Ole Miss here if you're just looking for cheap dart throws in this receiver room. They moved John Reese Plumlee to receiver, and he's a player that was targeted a bit down the stretch. They gave him 6 targets in the final game. He's 3,600, another cheaper filler you could look to. They had a couple decent transfers. Ja'Cour Pearson comes over from transfer. He's somebody that maybe is worth a look at 4,200, should get on the field a little bit here. And then the other 2 players that were listed as primary backups that may get a handful of snaps are Danish Jackson and Jaden Jackson. Just 2 names to potentially monitor here, but really like the cheaper options. Interested in John Reese Plumlee because he will get gadget action, potentially reverses, carries out of the backfield. Like Henry Parrish's cheap options, but ultimately with Ole Miss, you want to focus on the studs. You want to look to your Braylon Sanders, your Mingos, your Elys, and your Matt Corrals, especially with the immense spread we have here, 10.5 points, 75.5 total. Kickers, they are viable in games with these immense totals. They're more cash options, but you can certainly play them. I'm pretty much just going to look at skill position players with this game expected to score a ton of points overall. But that'll do it for us today. Thank you guys for listening. I'm Matt Gajewski on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. Check out everything we have to offer on the Awesemo platform. And before we head out, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. We will see you guys again next time.